People are complaining about the NFL ticket prices here in Australia, but they have no idea what they're actually paying for. This isn't a game. This is a multi-million-dollar operation just to get the two teams here. And when you actually understand the numbers, those prices, they make a lot more sense.
Welcome to the Sunday Standard.
Welcome back to the channel. My name is Anders. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Sunday Standard. So we'll get into that, what is happening, the ticket prices, and what people are thinking. I've even jumped on to the official NFL Facebook group for Australia and New Zealand and put out the question to the die-hard supporters. And some of the answers that I got back were pretty interesting to see. We'll also get into the Las Vegas Raiders signing Kirk Cousins and why this move has nothing to do with winning right now and everything to do with building the organisation properly. Plus, the Sunday Standard Power Index is back for another week, teams 17 through 12, and we'll finish off with the back end of this upcoming draft where I run through who I think the teams in picks 27 to will be selecting. So let's get into it. Everybody's reacting to the price for the upcoming NFL game here in Australia, but nobody's actually asking the question about what it takes to make this game happen. Now, a lot of the die-hard fans actually do have a rough understanding, and we'll get into that a little bit later on. But for the casual fan, they don't understand what it takes, and it takes an army, as the saying goes. Some people think it's just 53 players and a couple of coaches that will make the trip the West Coast over here to Australia for a couple of days, play a game, and head back. That is exactly the opposite of what occurs. This is months of planning. Millions of dollars goes into this. So let's start from the top. You're looking at a team of 53 men plus the coaches, and that's not just 3 coaches, 4 coaches. We're talking about a staffing of about 25 coaches, from head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, special teams coordinator, and then running through all your position coaches as well. Quarterback, wide receiver, defensive line, offensive line, wide receiver. It just goes on and on. And then they've got their assistants, etc., etc. So you're looking at probably 100 staff, 120 staff just between the players and the coaches alone. But then you bring into just the staff for the team, just the general staff. You've got media, you've got trainers, you've got medical staff, doctors, strength and conditioning. It all adds up. At the end of the day, you're looking at about 200 staff. And they're not here just for 2 or 3 days. Because of the time difference, they need to take all of that into consideration. Then you've got the travel aspect of the game. A 15 to 16 hour chartered flight. So take that into account for each team, plus the NFL staff that need to come over, but we'll get into that a little bit later on. You're crossing multiple time zones, your body clock's completely off, and then that affects your training, your recovery, the whole 9 yards. So this is one of the most physical sports in the world, and you can't just land, shake it off, and play at the best of your ability. You got to adjust your training schedules, adjust your nutrition, adjust your sleep. These players are creatures of habit. They are so set in the sort of direction that they need to go to perform at the best of their ability. So this isn't just a fly over and play a game and jump back on the jet and happy days. It's a full operation to make sure this product that the NFL is selling, and hopefully using us as a stepping stone to continue further growing the game here in the Oceania, sort of Asia region, is to the highest standard. The next part, which obviously blew my mind, and I had a rough understanding of what it took, but the amount of equipment that is sent to a international game is incredible. So they're not just chucking in the jerseys and heading over. Watching a video that the LA Chargers put together for their trip down to Sao Paulo when they played the Kansas City Chiefs a few years ago, they took about 15 to 18,000 kilos worth of equipment. Everything that the organisation needs, everything that the players need. I think they took about 20 pounds of peanut butter. The nutrition and the equipment and all their jerseys. Peak the Sunday Standard jersey. It's Prototype 1. I thought I'd jump that in there to if people wondered what I was wearing. Look, you compare that to the AFL. They travel with 1.2 tons of stuff. So this is 25 times that amount of equipment. And it's not something that just gets done on the day. They don't chuck it all on a plane. This will be sort of in the process, the logistics of it heading down here, already probably on a ship and making its way over to Melbourne. So take all that into account, especially with everything that's happening in the world at the moment with fuel prices. You can imagine it becomes quite a very expensive task. And then there's the production. So this isn't just a game, it's a travelling production. You're not just moving players from the other side of the world, you're moving entire broadcast production. Cameras, rigs, audios, replay systems, lighting, everything you see on the TV on a Monday here in Australia has to be replicated into a stadium that hasn't been built for the game. So bring all that across. You've got the broadcast teams, the producers, the directors, content teams, social media teams, just the media staff in general. You're bringing across all the different bits and pieces you need to do for activations of the game, which will be heading into the week. It has to all look exactly the same as it would back in the States, because they are producing the same angles, the same quality, and the same experience for the millions of people on the West Coast and all across the States that will be watching this game. Because as soon as the product looks different, the viewers drop off, and then that is huge for the NFL. So this isn't just bringing a game to Australia. This is literally recreating the NFL environment from scratch. 14,000 kilometres away. And before we move on, I wanted to take this a step further, and I put the question to the diehard fans from here in Australia and across the pond in New Zealand. So I went to the official NFL Facebook group here for Australian NFL fans and put the question out about what people are willing to spend and a few other different questions. And some of the responses that I got back were very interesting. So let's jump into that. Look, most of the fans were comfortable paying somewhere between $300 to sort of $700 range for their tickets that they either grabbed in the Amex and MCC ticket pre-sale that went out last week. But sort of once you went past that $700 into the $800,000 mark, a lot of people started to drop off. And look, I understand that, especially for the fans coming from interstate. You have to then pay for travel, pay for accommodation. It's not just down and back for the game. It's a couple of days to immerse yourself in the experience, hopefully get to some of the NFL activations that'll be happening throughout Melbourne, undoubtedly. So it's a whole thing. So I completely understand from that standpoint, but at the same time, some fans were willing to spend $3, $5, even up to $10,000 to travel to the States and experience the game there at a stadium built for it, and being amongst 60 to 70,000 fans. Depending on what stadium you go to really immerse yourself in the whole tailgate experience and being able to head to another few different games, not just the one here in Melbourne. So what really stood out to me is this isn't just one audience, it's sort of two. You've got the fans who just want the experience. They'll go no matter who's playing. They just want to go to their first game and the first regular season game here in Australia. And I completely understand that. You want to experience the game that we love to get up and watch at 3 a.m. here on Monday. But then you've also got the diehard fans who are only showing up for their team. They'll spend big, but only if it's sort of worth their time to go to the game personally for one of their own teams. So look, some of the responses I got. One fan said, anything over $500 and I'm out. Look, 100% understand, big outlay for anyone travelling. Another one said, I'd spend thousands if my team was playing. Otherwise, I'm not going. And then there was, I'd rather spend on the money and go to the US for the real experience. And obviously the major feedback that I got from a lot of people was the oval stadium that the game is being played on, the MCG. Look, I completely understand where a lot of people are coming from, but from a business standpoint, it's the biggest stadium here in Australia. It makes the most sense from a business standpoint. They're going to be able to get more eyes on the game. And look, people can come out and say, they're not going to go and they don't think the game is worth that much. But at the end of the day, there'll be 100,000 people at the G irregardless. I can guarantee you it will sell out. we saw the amount of numbers that were just piling in to get those pre-sale tickets. So I can't imagine there not being a complete sellout there at the MC. So what does this tell me? It tells me that Aussie and New Zealand fans want the game here, but not at the American prices and not in the wrong stadium. So look, some big decisions to be made by the NFL. I think they will take a lot of data away from the game. Will they sort of maybe look to bring potentially 2 games here, play it at a sort of an Accor or a Suncorp stadium to sort of have it on an appropriate field? But we shall wait and see. So speaking of big decisions, let's talk about the Raiders and Kirk Cousins. Bringing in a veteran quarterback like Kirk Cousins structured it really well. So essentially it is a 1-year deal, $20 million guaranteed, $1.3 million base, with $8.7 million being picked up by the Falcons, and then that $10 million roster bonus as well. You've also got the option to look for a sort of second year if required, but I think by then a guy like Mendoza will be ready to go 17 games for the season. I'm not to say he won't play a lot, depending on sort of where the team is halfway through the season. Do they sort of give Mendoza a bit of time to get under centre, play a few snaps here and there? I think they do, to get him up to speed with the game, which is a huge jump from college to the pros. But I really like the signing. It will help him develop as a quarterback. You're sitting behind a guy like Kirk Cousins. It really helps with him to understand the structure, the preparation, gives them leadership aspects. Look, we've all seen what Mendoza has come through the system, and his obviously last year there in Indiana, giving them a national championship, winning a Heisman Trophy, and being sort of really cementing himself as that number 1 pick. But you're sitting behind a guy like Kirk Cousins, and it really sort of helps develop him exponentially. So I really like that signing, and especially when you're looking to play guys like Patrick Mahomes, Herbert, and Bo Nix twice a year. You need someone like that under centre to help you sort of get through the season, and for it to not be another complete write-off where you're then again looking at sort of at that lower end top 10 draft pick, which, look, it wouldn't be horrible to have another sort of high-end draft pick next year to hopefully, again, provide Mendoza with another weapon on the outside or further help on the defensive side of the ball. They certainly need another big wide receiver that can be a number 1 option for him. Obviously, you've got Brock Bowers, you've got Ashton Genty. So bringing in a head coach, it starts from the top, where you bring in a coach like Kubiak, and it sort of trickles down, and hopefully all the boys want to come out there and really perform for him and for the organisation as a whole. So I really like the trajectory of where the Raiders are heading with that. So yeah, good signing there by them. Let's quickly touch on something that the league is actually doing that really matters. In episode 1, I spoke about obviously the horrific passing of Rondale Moore. So it's come out this week that it's been signed off by every owner in the league that they will have a full-time mental health clinician there in the organisation, which is so important for these players, because I don't think people really understand how regimented these guys are, especially even coming through the collegiate system into the NFL. They essentially babied, and that's not a bad thing, but their lives are set out so incredibly structured. Wake up, you eat this, you train now, you go into meetings, you do this, you go home, you sleep this, you must eat this. So as soon as an injury occurs to you and you're sort of away from the building, you're going through the rehab, this all sort of adds up because you're taken away from that structure, and that really hurts your mental health, and ultimately, and unfortunately, it does become too much for these guys. So I think bringing in a full-time clinician for the players is a step in the right direction, but I think a lot more still needs to be done for this league when it comes to the mental health of these players, because at the end of the day, they are still human. All right, let's get into the Sunday Standard Power Index for another week. Here are the teams that I went through last week from positions 22 to 18 in my power rankings. So let's get into the ones from 17 through to 12. Starting off with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. solid organisation, like where they are. Obviously, losing Mike Evans is a massive loss. The leadership and just the standard of his play certainly is a big loss. I think they're really well coached organisation with Todd Bowles, really well organised. They're competitive every week, but it's just that defensive side of the ball. They really need someone to step up there. Not having a player go over 8 sacks in the last 4 seasons. You're not that real disruptive kind of a defense that can certainly swing a game. So I need to see a little bit more on that side. I really need to see a little bit more out of Emeka Ibuka this season. Another huge season from Godwin as well. Hopefully not affected by injury. You brought in Kenneth Gainwell, which is a really good get. I think he certainly gives you help at running back with Bucky Irving again having another big year. But yeah, like I said, there's no real fear factor in this sort of team, and it's not a team that goes into a game where you think they're going to win by 2, 3, 4, 5 touchdowns. They're all sort of going to be pretty close. So I need to see a little bit more. Look, I think they'll stay relevant, but I don't, again, see them pushing sort of into the deep playoff games. They might get to a sort of wild card position. I think they're stable, but they're sort of capped there in that sort of middle of the range sort of organisations. Moving on to number 16 in this week's Sunday Standard Power Index, I have got the Dallas Cowboys. Look, talent doesn't equal results, and we saw that again last season. Obviously, CD was injured for a lot of it, but at the end of the day, you're a loaded roster on the offensive side of the ball. You've got George Pickens, depending on what sort of happens with that franchise tag situation. You've got CeeDee Lamb, who's always going to be sort of in that top 5, top 8 echelon of wide receivers in the league, and they look good in stretches, but the Cowboys, the defensive side of the ball, they've got to get better there. It's going to be a very defensive sort of draft for the Cowboys, like I said last episode, but I need to see more from them. When it matters, they collapse, isn't anywhere to be seen, and it's just inconsistency in big moments. You're paying Dak so much money, and he's great. Look, we've seen it every year. We've seen Cowboys fans come out and say it's going to be this year until they prove it. Nothing sort of changes, unfortunately, for the Cowboys. Take that as how you wish. Let's move on to number 15 for the Sunday Standard Power Index. Got the Detroit Lions. Look, they're a physical, identity-driven organisation, and they're continuing to sort of develop as an organisation, but just the health issues and the unfortunate ability to be able to not put the best team on the field at any sort of point throughout the season has been at the detriment to them, unfortunately, the last couple of years. So I just haven't really seen enough consistency at that sort of high end level for them to be in a top 10 sort of position in a power rankings sort of standpoint. They're dangerous, but I don't trust them yet. They're close, but they're not proven. And it's, again, it's about staying healthy when it matters. Obviously, losing David Montgomery is a huge loss for the organisation. Having that two-headed monster at running back with Sonic and Knuckles. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is one of the best running backs in the league, and he will have a great season again, but you're putting a lot of pressure on him for him to perform. So we will have to wait and see where they are as an organisation as we move through the season. Moving on to number 14 on the Sunday Standard Power Index, I've got the Green Bay Packers. Look, they are on the rise. They are not there yet. I need to see more out of Jordan Love. I really need to see him make that next step at the quarterback position, hopefully not have a disrupted year like last year with injury. Obviously, throughout the off-season, you have lost some key players on both sides of the balls. You've lost, obviously, Malik going down there to Miami. You've lost Romeo Dobbs to the Patriots. You've lost Key Walker to the Raiders. So they got Rashawn Gary heading to the Dallas Cowboys. So losing a lot of major players on sort of both sides of the balls. I need to see a lot of players sort of step up now. Matthew Golden, I think I need to see him take to the next step to become sort of the wide receiver one option there. So yeah, sort of roundabout, but I need to see a little bit more. They've been inconsistent in periods of time, periods of the game where I need to see a little bit more for them to sort of start to go up in the power rankings to be sort of a future contender. But at the moment, I don't see them as a current threat towards the back end of this season. Moving on to number 13, I've got the Kansas City Chiefs. Look, whenever you've got a guy like Patrick Mahomes under centre, you're going to be a dangerous organisation. We've seen that. Still a lot of question marks around what he's going to be like coming back from ACL. Is he going to be ready to go week 1? Are you going to have to play Justin Fields as your QB1 for a little bit until he is ready to go? Look, you brought in Kenneth Walker there, which is a huge signing. That's probably the best running back, or it is without a doubt the best running back that Patrick Mahomes has had behind him there. They're still going to win games. They're still going to be competitive, but it's just not an offense that is dominant. It's an aging roster in some sort of parts. Chris Jones is getting a little bit older. You've lost, obviously, Trent McDuffie to the Rams. The just wide receiver sort of core group is not something that screams like really threatening. Obviously, we've seen what they're capable of over the years. 3 Super Bowls is nothing to laugh at, but at the end of the day, it's just where everything else and where other organisations are at this point in time. I think obviously Travis Kelce coming back for another couple of years, probably more likely, obviously re-sign for 3, probably more going to be like a 1-year contract, but look, they're not top tier anymore. And we saw that last year. So I think they'll be around the mark, but need to see a little bit more for them to head up. Number 12, the Sunday Standard Power Index. I have got the Jacksonville Jaguars. Really high ceiling, inconsistent floor. Look, week to week, it's inconsistent. You don't know what you're going to get. You don't know what Trevor Lawrence is going to show up at the game. Building, you can look elite in sort of stretches, but then you can look pretty average at the other end. Playoff capable, yes, maybe, but just not enough reliability yet. When they're on, they look legit, but you don't know what you're getting at the end of the day. And consistency is the difference between good and great. All right, let's just close this out with the back end of the NFL draft. We are about 3 weeks away from that, so let's get into that. With pick 27, I've got the San Francisco 49ers taking Jordan Tyson, wide receiver out of Arizona State. Some serious concerns behind his hamstring. Obviously not going at the combine, and he's still got, I think, a private workout to happen in sort of a week before the draft. So with that uncertainty is where it's sort of the slide happens for these players, and they do sort of fall further than most originally thought they would go. Some boards I do see some boards that I've seen him going quite high, and that sort of even top 10, some coming out sort of that 10 to 15 range. But I think, unfortunately, from a standpoint where you've got a pretty decent sort of set of wide receivers coming out of this first round, I think he will be sort of that latter end, unfortunately. Obviously, the 49ers don't need a wide receiver at the moment, especially bringing in guys like Mike Evans and Christian Kirk, but it's a long-term sort of development plan to bring in a guy like Jordan Tyson. Good teams don't chase what they need, they stay ahead of it, and this is how strong rosters stay strong. And with the 28th pick in this upcoming draft, the Houston Texans, I think, need to, again, bulk out that offensive line. So I think them taking a guy like Blake Miller out of Clemson is the right decision. Obviously, the Texans sort of stripped away their offensive line coming out of 2024 when CJ was sacked 52 times, and then that was more than halved down to about 23 sacks for the last year, but we did see a production sort of drop off. So I think, again, you continue to build out the offensive line, you get Tank Dell back. Nico Collins also going to be sort of one of those top wide receivers in the league. Obviously, you've added David Montgomery to the mix now as well. Look, at the end of the day, if your quarterback isn't protected, your offense collapses. Big long-term investment with protecting CJ Stroud, and this is how you build sustainability. So I think they're thereabouts, the Texans, but certainly see a little bit more improvement to sort of really push them towards going deeper in the playoffs. And with pick 29 of this upcoming draft, I've got the Kansas City Chiefs taking Kenyon Sadiq out of Oregon, the tight end. A lot of boards having him coming off a little bit earlier. I think he does drop to a team like the Chiefs that have that requirement for the position. Obviously, planning for the future, you're only going to get, like I said, one more year probably out of Travis Kelce. So you don't, after he's gone, you replace him now, you bring in a guy like Kenyon. The last time the Chiefs had 2 picks in the first round, they took George Karlaftis and Trent McDuffie. Obviously, you've gotten this pick from the Rams because you traded off Trent McDuffie. This is, a succession plan. And again, this is how sort of great teams stay ahead of the curve rather than seeing a massive drop off. You need to continue to sort of work with Patrick Mahomes while he's in that window of still being one of the best quarterbacks in the league, regardless of him coming back from injury. So, I think you bring in a guy like Sadiq and he sort of fills that gap for you there. And with the 30th pick of this upcoming draft, I've got the Miami Dolphins taking Zion Young, the edge rusher out of Missouri. Obviously, the Dolphins have gotten this pick from the Denver Broncos with the Jalen Waddle trade. So you don't need to replace a wide receiver with a wide receiver. You rebuild the team. You take what you need. They're in a full rebuild, this organisation. Obviously got that huge amount of money that they're paying for players that they're not playing for them. But look, I saw a lot out of Zion Young there in Missouri last year. 6.5 sacks, 16.5 tackles for loss. He's a constant pressure player, and this isn't a sort of a flashy signing. It's what's necessary for this organisation as they go through the proper rebuild. They're down in South Beach. With the 31st pick in this upcoming draft, I've got the Patriots taking TJ Parker out of Clemson, another edge rusher. 21.5 sacks over 3 years down there in Clemson. Proven production. He's a reliable presence on the edge there. Patriots, again, continue to rebuild their identity as being one of the most dominant organisations in the history of the league. So bringing in a guy, they need consistency, not risk. This isn't a gamble. This is a proven player. Piece by piece, this is how you rebuild and, again, continue to be a dominant force. And I think New England will be around the blocks a while I think the New England Patriots will be around the block for a while with a guy like Drake May. Again, probably going to have another huge year this year now that he's experienced what it is like to get that close to being a Super Bowl champion. And with the 32nd pick in this upcoming NFL draft, I have got the Seattle Seahawks picking up Avion Terrell out of Clemson. Cornerback, obviously you replace a key loss, you maintain structure. So with replacing Tariq Woolen that you've lost in this offseason, you need to have balance at the cornerback position. You can't have one weak side. That's where you get exposed. So bringing in a guy like Avion Terrell, who I think is a really good pickup in this sort of position. Obviously, you're not going to get one of those really top cornerbacks in this draft, but I think he gives you enough to be a presence there on one of the other wide receivers, so you don't sort of get exposed. This is a clean and logical pick from the Seahawks if they sort of want to remain in that window of being one of the best teams in the league. And that's the first round, 32 all the way to 1. This is all sort of where things really start to take shape, because once this draft hits, everything changes. If you've made it this far, I appreciate you. We're building something here, and this is just the beginning. New episodes every Monday, 6 p.m. This is the Sunday Standard.